And we'll give that a few seconds anyway. Welcome everyone to the world of tomorrow. No, to the D365 UG MCR, brought to you remotely from anywhere you are in the world. And that's the great thing about this. Joe and I are very happy to have three amazing speakers with us tonight on a variety of topics. Joe has been encouraging certain speakers for quite some time to come and chat to us, and I guess the encouragement wore him down. We have three amazing speakers. We have two great topics. I'm not going to bore you with any BS PowerPoint slides tonight. We're just going to get straight into the action. I would say if no one has signed up to the D365 community user group that we have, yes, you do need a D365 community login. Sorry, Michael. But we would really love it if you could sign up to the user group. That was a link to the event. Ignore that one. I'll get the actual user group up. It really helps us send out our message whenever we have new events and things like that. We do also have a couple of new people on our committee. Some of them are here tonight, some of them aren't, but hopefully it'll enable us to do more events in the future. I'll be dropping a survey into the chat towards the end of the evening with just some questions about how we can better facilitate user groups. We're trying to get back in person. Things happened. Didn't work out that way, but we would like to see whether you still want hybrid events, like maybe in person and online, maybe ones where we could try and stream it, technical limitations aside, or whether you like a mix and what else it is you want to see. So I'll do that towards the end, but without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first speaker. I've known Eswar for a while. He used to work for the company that I currently am employed for. One thing he doesn't know is that my boss, his former boss, when Eswar was leaving the company, said to me that Eswar was too smart to be here. Eswar needs to go off and do brilliant things somewhere else where he can flourish. I think he has done that with his job moves, and he has got an awesome presentation on AI tonight. So Eswar, if you'd like to share your screen and start your presentation, we would love to hear what you have to say. Oh, and before he starts, he is a new speaker. This is his first event, so go easy on him. Eswar, if you'd like questions at the end, I would probably recommend that. We'll try and keep an eye on the chat for you to try and collate any questions that maybe drop in there. Feel free to drop in the chat and we can maybe pick them up with Eswar at the end, is what I would recommend. But over to you, Ash.
Thanks, Matt. So let me start my presentation. So just to warn you, I've got this computer sound on, I think, when I'm setting, because I need that as a part of the presentation. So if you hear any echoes or anything like that, let me know. So let me start by saying hello all, welcome, and thank you for attending this session, and a big shout out to Matt and Joe for allowing me to do this talk. It's a subject I quite enjoy talking about, and people who know me know how annoying I can be when I start talking about it, right? So over the next half hour or so, I would like to introduce you to some concepts behind artificial intelligence or AI, and see how we can benefit from it as Power Platform developers who work within the Microsoft space, right? Especially on how to integrate AI with model-driven apps, right? So who am I? My name is Eswar Prakesh, and I am a senior consultant in the applications platform team at HSO. My day job is predominantly focused on Power Platform, Azure, and a bit of AI, but my interests involve a lot of AI, specifically what is called conversational AI and natural language processing. Now, I get excited when I'm talking about AI because of what I believe it promises for the future world and the kind of problems it can help solve. For example, here's a quite quite a real problem facing linguists of the world, right? So it is expected that thousands of languages across the world are going to disappear from this world by 2040. Now, imagine such a language, hardly spoken because people have moved on to more global languages, will never be seen or heard again. I mean, and imagine all the knowledge that would have been accumulated and spoken and written in that language during its lifetime, basically just disappearing forever. I believe it would be a shame and a huge disservice to the humanity if we are unable to preserve at least some of it, and by consequence, all the knowledge that belongs with it, right? So, but how do we preserve it? We could train a bunch of people to remember all of it, but probably get in the sort of same situation we are in, or we could use technology to do it, and technology such as AI. So what I mentioned above is one of the several use cases you have for the use of AI, right? So AI is tremendously powerful. When used right, it could sort of find users in amazingly unique places, right? So what we're going to do is look at few of the scenarios which I believe are unique in the way that the solutions for them do not live within the conventional app building thing, right? So I do this with all presentations. I begin by saying what it is and what it is not, right? So, so I would like to set some expectations on what I hope to cover in this presentation. So I work in the Microsoft space predominantly, and this presentation is going to reference that space quite a lot, right? The aim of this presentation is to introduce you to some of the basic concepts behind AI and to ease you into using AI in your applications and solutions. Well, that said, as you would have guessed, I love talking about AI and its applications. So I would request you to connect with me on social media so we can have conversation about it, if you like. So let's get started. What is AI and how does it differ from human intelligence, right? So cognitive scientists, people who study human brain and mind, believe that intelligence is just not just about logic and common sense, right? So many of our decisions are not made that way. There is a lot more subtlety to them, right? Scientists claim that there are deep layers to our minds where emotional intelligence, empathy, and compassion plays a part in the decisions we make, and not just hard, cold logic. And one of the most important reasons we do something is because of a desire to act. So given a choice, and I know a lot of us do this, given a choice, we may not get out of our beds without us having a need or a reason to do so, right? So that desire is a primary motivation for a lot of things that we do, including, and many scientists believe this, including the evolution of our own species itself, right? A machine at this stage of technological advancements cannot have or even mimic that desire, right? What it can do at best, it can mimic logic, provided, and this is the key element here, provided it has been trained to do so, right? Now, so to compare human intelligence and what we now know as AI, and to expect AI to behave like a human being would be unfair to it, right? So this description here, comparing AI and human intelligence, sums it up correctly. So using AI, we could use any poet's work to train a machine to write poetry. But can we imagine the answer if we ask the machine if it really wants to, right? We probably will either not get an answer, or you will see the machine is totally perplexed by that question because it won't be able to understand the question. Now, either way, we will never be able to have a machine wanting to write poetry, at least for now. So that's the difference between what I believe is the difference between a machine and a human intelligence. Now, how did it all begin, right? So up until about 1940s, AI was always considered a fantastical idea. To make a machine think was considered an amazing goal to have. There are references in sort of ancient Greek literature about such machines, mostly fiction, but we shouldn't believe that such machines ever existed in our past or now even in the present. So in the 1940s, with the World War II going on, a young British scientist by the name of Alan Turing came up with this notion of thinking machines. And even devised a test to see if a machine can actually think or not. It came to be known as the Turing test, but you may know it by a different name, the imitation game, made famous by that movie on his life history. However, even with all that scientific talk, fiction has never stopped imagining the worst of machines, right? We have had robots invading from the future, equipped with sentient artificial intelligence. We have had AI running spaceships, making decisions on whether human beings or aliens need to be kept alive. I think you know which movies I'm referring to, right? So fantastical stuff, but not tied at all to reality. Now, if you were to think about your own impression of what AI is, I bet you these fiction and stories may have a lot to do with that idea. So I think it's good to do a quick reality check on that idea, right? So let's, if you can check out that picture on to the right or left, depending on where you sit. Um, that is the the picture of the first car ever built. I believe it was designed by Mercedes-Benz. It was hardly any features. It has hardly any features we associate with a car, right? So there's no automation whatsoever, no fuel gauge, no speedometer, no AC, no leather seats, nothing, right? So if I were to compare the state of AI as of now with this first car, I would say it'll be pretty accurate. I would say we are at least a century away from realizing an all singing, all dancing machine that can actually think and pass the Turing test, right? Now, what is being portrayed in the movies and fiction is what we in the field call artificial general intelligence, right? And we are at least a century away, like I said, from realizing that kind of power. What we currently have to work with is what we call narrow AI. When we talk about narrow AI, we are talking about a restricted domain, a world where that AI agent operates in, and it is only capable of acting inside that domain and nothing more. We won't be able to take, say, an AI agent trained to recognize cats from cat pictures and have it automatically recognize dogs from dog pictures, right? They are typically independent disciplines. They do not understand problems of each other. Instead, they do what they do well in their own domain and world. And I'm talking about the different narrow AIs available in currently. To solve a real world problem, we probably will end up having to use the expertise of more than one type of these narrow AI agents, right? So I want to dig a little bit more deeper into this concept of narrow AI because it has a lot to do with how we perceive artificial intelligence and how we work with it, right? So much like any other scientific discipline, AI is also made up of specialized disciplines that work alone or together to provide a solution to a problem. So when we build solutions for AI, an engineer specializing in AI typically brings one or more of these disciplines together. Like large ecosystems, such as Microsoft 365 or Dynamics 365, it'll be very rare occurrence to find an AI engineer who knows every single discipline and can work with them seamlessly. I would say it's impossible. You will find specialists for individual disciplines or solution architects who understand the needs of a customer, much like how we do our work, and can bring some of these specialists together to design a solution for that customer. But what about power platformers like us, right? What avenues do we have? Without a lot of AI engineering help, you'll find that integrating AI into your solutions becomes extremely difficult, impossible, or even if you do not know enough about the core AI concepts. It is quite easy for people to get lost in that core AI concepts, probably leading to sort of disillusionments, dejections, disappointment, ultimately leading to people not wanting to work with AI, right? But without knowing everything about AI, how do we even get started solving problems with it, right? It is important that we, as Power Platform enthusiasts and developers, not only understand the strengths, but also the weaknesses of AI systems before we jump into, starting integrating AI into our solutions. So there are two separate services that I would like to talk about today, which makes our lives as Power Platformers easier when we want to integrate AI into our solutions, right? With cloud services, so one is Microsoft Azure AI, and the other one is AI in Power Platform, which is AI Builder and virtual agents, etc. So with cloud services such as Microsoft Azure, those difficult bits of core AI work are all abstracted away, right? So you don't have to worry about learning, building, and training these models. With search services, you really don't need to know AI engineering at all, really. I mean, you could learn. I mean, you can do your own ground up work in Azure, using machine learning workspace and build your own models, but you don't really need to, right? So Azure provides a host of AI services collected into a single point of access called cognitive services, right? You could simply use the APIs that cognitive services provide with no-code tools such as Power Automate or Canvas apps to bring AI functionality into your app. While Azure has made it fantastically easy for us to work with AI, it has been made much easier with AI Builder in Power Platform, right? You might have seen them. You might have seen them on the left side with all the Dataverse tables, etc. You might have seen that AI Builder and virtual agents come up. The AI Builder that is a part of the Power Platform allows us to do a lot of what Azure AI does, but more visually within the Power Platform environment itself. So you don't have to jump into Azure to do that, right? At present, there are about 10 pre-built models that you can use straight away without changes. You can refine some of those models with your own data to make it very specific to you. For example, if you have very specific set of objects to be detected from images, you can then use examples of those images to train those models within Power Platform itself. So it would be quite visual. It doesn't need, you don't need to, even then you don't need to write code to do that, right? So if you're a bit confused about me using the term model over and over again, so just don't worry. Think of a model as some sort of a mathematical representation of a problem space and a solution space combined together, right? There's a whole science and art behind building these models, typically put together by AI engineers, but you don't really require that level of deep knowledge of building these models from scratch just to work with them, right? With AI Builder, it becomes very, very easy. But I've talked about two different services right now, but which do you choose when you're building your solutions, right? We need to be careful when you do that, because AI Builder is great when you consider you don't need to leave your Power Platform. It's all Power Platformy. It's got visuals. You can do it all with click and drag and all that. But it comes with a very high cost of ownership. Now, if you have looked at the licensing options with AI Builder, even with the sort of what do they call that? The pay as you go model, you get a bit of Azure credits with those plans, but that's not enough if you're actually seriously wanting to do something with AI. So you obviously have to rely on the AI Builder licensing model, which becomes quite expansive and expensive. So in such cases, Azure AI makes sense, right? So it's far less expensive, but it requires a degree of knowledge of Azure and APIs to integrate with it. So if you have worked with the HTTP action in Flow, you might still be able to use it. But then again, you got the licensing model stopping you from doing a lot of that with it. So, but it'll work out. I mean, I've read some articles online. It still works out cheaper than going for the full-blown AI Builder sort of things, right? When using so each has its pros and cons, and I would recommend weighing them carefully when we build our solutions. I would recommend looking at the licensing model available for the users or for your customers, the usage metrics for the solution, as in how big or how much are you going to use AI, and also the budgetary constraints to come up with a choice. And I am talking massive amount of money here, right? So what you probably will end up doing when you actually start working with them is probably mixing up Azure AI and AI Builder and combining them together to get an optimized, cost optimized and effort optimized solution for you. Now, what I'm going to do is I've talked a bit about the theory behind AI. I've talked a bit about what Azure AI is and AI Builder is. I would like to demonstrate some elements of it, right? And I would like to present a few scenarios to demonstrate how AI solutions can be integrated into your solutions to solve some complex problems. Now, problems like these may seem like outliers, but I believe it would be interesting to think back and check whether we discount such problems and make them outliers, because there are no good solutions for them in traditional and conventional app building platforms, right? So we may have encountered such problems, but we may have shied away from solving the problem because of the fact that there is no solution for it, using the regular app building platform, etc. Right? So I'm gonna go through 3 scenarios, and you probably might have heard of those scenarios in your experience. I certainly have in few cases, and let's see if we can find a solution for them in using Azure AI or AI Builder. So the first one, I personally have heard variations of this requirement in my experience. So even if not exactly like this, they are quite similar in what is being expected from the system that you're building, right? So in this scenario, we have a utility company that provides installation services for its customers. The customers call out to them, they book in the details of what needs to be done in a job list, and then an engineer is assigned to carry out that job. When doing field visits, engineers are expected to upload photos from their work on site, right? So like before and after images of the work that was done. However, due to the sheer volume of these photos coming through, the users within this organization are finding it difficult to review the photos in time and decide whether a photo is relevant to the job or not. They need a way for the system to do it for them. At least in the first place, sift through those photographs and flag those that are relevant or not relevant or inappropriate. They expect to deal with outlier photos themselves because they know that AI, may not be successful all the time, right? But they expect such outliers to be minimal, so easily handled by, the users. So how do we do it? So for this, what I did was, to solve this problem, I decided to use Azure Cognitive Services, a Power Automate flow, and a model-driven app. The app will host the relevant database, it will host the data, with the flow being the bridge between the app and Azure AI. So let me switch to the desktop and demonstrate it for you. So here is a model-driven app, a typical model-driven app. You've got 4 areas here. One is called list of customers, the other one a list of jobs associated with the customer, a list of photographs that go with the jobs, and a place to feedback. And we'll cover those areas when we go to the next scenarios. So for this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly show you what a job card looks like. A job card is pretty much like this. It is assigned to a customer. It's got a description of what the customer is wanting. It's assigned to an engineer, right? There is a date requested when they want the job to be done. And the most important element here, the users who have put in this job card have also said that they want photos of roofs, of broken panels, of buildings, of houses. That's all we know, right? That is the kind of photographs that they are expecting the engineers to upload. On the right, you have a list of photographs. At the moment, it only has one. And it already is identified, has an identification saying that, well, this is not the photo that you're expecting, because this is just a photo of someone counting money, right? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add a new photo to this. So now you all have worked with Dataverse. You know how this goes. You can't upload a photograph directly into a photo record. You need to first save it, go back into it, and then upload a photograph, right? Don't worry about how it's looking. This is basically a custom control code component that I have built for this specific purpose. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose a photo. Now this time I'm going to choose a photo that seems to be relevant. It's a photo of the roof of a house, right? Now what the control has done is it has uploaded the crux of the photo. It has actually gone to Azure Cognitive Services, and it has actually picked up a description of the house itself, which is cool, right? So it's already done that. But what we want is for it to basically check whether it actually matches what the job is asking for. So I'm going to save and close this. Now, because it is built on Flow, you know how that is. It typically, well, it seems it's already approved it. That's great. So the Flow seems to have already run. So let me actually go to the Flow and see what it's saying. So the Flow, as you can see, is pretty simple, pretty straightforward. It's got a trigger, and it waits for photos to be uploaded. It's got a few sections for initializing variables. a few sections to retrieve data from the database, Dataverse obviously, and another section to update the database with what it found. Now, how does it find information, right? So this, you probably have seen this before, but this is an action. I think it is in preview at the moment, an action that connects you to Azure Cognitive Services. With this action, you can post an image into Azure Cognitive Services and expect results back. The result will look something like this. So it's basically describe the image, right, with very high confidence, and I'm sure we agree with that. The most important thing here is that it also tries to describe what it found, the objects and elements inside the photograph that it has found. So it has found a building, correct, and it's taken outdoor, which is correct. It's about a house, which is also correct. It has some wood in it, which is fantastic, I guess. But there are a few that you can see that it's missed. You know, it says sitting, table, man, clock. I don't see any of them in that image. Did you? So it's missed some of it. But the most important thing that it has picked up, and which we are it's very useful for us, is the fact that it has picked up that it is a picture of a roof. Now, how does it help? Because within the job card, we have mentioned that we want it to check whether it's roof or not, whether there is a roof or not. So what this step in flow is basically doing is comparing the tags it found within the photo with the needs of the job. And it has figured, and you can immediately see that there is a match here. And because it's found a match, it has figured out that the photo is relevant. So let's go back to the job card, and let's see what the job card is telling us now. And like we expected, the first photo is still not relevant. The second photo, though, it has marked it as relevant. See, so cool, right? So the great thing about this is that we have not asked the engineer to describe the photo. We have literally asked the engineer to simply upload a photograph. That's all for that particular job. And we have been able to understand from the photograph whether it is relevant to the job card or not, right? So moving on to the next scenario. The next scenario is something interesting. So in this scenario, you want to put up a feedback page or a section as a part of the app that you're building for your customers to use, right? This will be feedback for the service that you have done for them. Now, you could use star ratings functionality available in the Dataverse, plus a comment box maybe. But the star ratings, the reason being that you put star ratings because you want to be able to somehow quantify that feedback, right? So you want to know what that feedback is about, right? And then do some analysis on them. But what the problem with that is that you've completely missed out the insights that you can gain from the comment itself, right? You probably want to combine both the star ratings, the feedback that you get, the feedback in the star ratings form, and what is in the text, and then combine them to see whether it's a positive feedback or a negative feedback, or what level of positivity is it about. Now, what about the other scenario where the feedback is coming from, say, a Twitter or Facebook, where you cannot actually collect star ratings? You basically will have to rely on the text that has been entered, right? Now, a good example is the omni-channel marketing thing, right? So where your feedback and requests are coming through from various places in the social media, you would want to quantify that, analyze that, and see how well you're doing for a customer, right? Can we do that with AI? So let's see. So for this scenario, I have used a canvas page embedded within a model-driven app, right? An AI model builder model. I've used AI builder because I just want to show you how that you can swap between Azure services or AI services in Azure and AI builder, and the same model-driven app that we saw earlier, right? So I don't necessarily need a canvas page. I could still use the model-driven app itself. However, I wanted to demonstrate that we can use a full-blown canvas app or a hybrid solution that includes some power effects and canvas apps to deliver the same solution, right? I also wanted to use AI builder directly instead of going through a flow, right? So let's go to our next screen. So here is a canvas app. It's a very simple canvas page, as you can imagine. I've embedded that within within the model-driven app. On the left, you see a list of feedback items that you've already gotten. On the right, you get a form where we are going to simulate a customer, putting in some feedback. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste one positive and one negative comment, right? So let's see. So the work done. So this is very positive, as you can see. It talks about how perfectly the work was done, and the fact that they were polite and they were on time, etc. Right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to submit this. Now, when I submit this, it goes off to AI Builder, analyzes what has been said, and figures out how positive that feedback is. And now it has detected that it's positive. Well done, and that it has marked it with a green circle. Right. I'm going to do one more feedback here, and this time I'm going to do a negative one. Right. I mean, this would be my version of much of the feedback that we get from our customers anyway. So this is again a negative feedback. It says that they don't recommend our services because the engineer was late and there were serious issues with the work that was completed. Right. I'm going to submit this again, and let's see what happens. Now this time it has rightfully detected that it is a negative comment. Right. Now we have collected it. We've got it. We have the feedback there. We have sort of quantified it. We have sort of figured out that there is a positivity. One is a positive and a negative. But how can we bring that into the model-driven app? I mean, this can be done with Power BI if you want. But I just wanted to demonstrate something cool with it, right? Because I like code components. So this is my version of having fun, right? So here you have your feedback list already come through, and here this particular control is tied to a roll-up field, and you probably have used roll-up fields before. As you know, it runs every night, and we don't want to wait until that. So I'm going to force a recalculation. I'm going to refresh this page. There we go. So you got a graph that basically says that 51% of users from this account rated us positive for our services. Now that's interesting. We had one positive and one negative, and it somehow detected that 51% the positive rating for some reason. And the reason is very simple. When we do sentiment analysis with AI, it is not just returning the fact that it is positive or negative. It is also returning how positive or how negative a particular comment is. So in the second one, potentially, probably, maybe it was wrong, but it probably found something positive. I have no idea what it found positive. It probably found something positive, and that is why there is a 1% extra positivity that is attached to the feedback, right? So that brings us to the final scenario that I want to cover, and this one is quite important to me. Now, accessibility and inclusivity is quite an important subject for me. I would recommend, following the A11Y tag in Twitter and see how brilliant work is being done by the community to support people with disabilities and accessibility concerns, and making physical and virtual places extremely accessibility friendly. This particular scenario that I'm going to present is a homage to that community. Now, this one deals with one such requirement for accessibility support, right? And it's all about images again. So what I want is that when I display an image in my app, I want to display an associated description for that image so that screen readers can dictate it to the users, right? So screen readers basically read through, it looks at all the elements on the page, and it starts narrating that to the user who is listening. No, we obviously could suggest the person uploading the image, describe the image as they're uploading it, or we could help them by automatically describing these images as they are displayed, right? Could AI help us with automatic description? Now, in this scenario, again, I've chosen Azure Cognitive Services. I mean, nothing stopping us from using AI Builder, but there is a specific reason why I chose Azure Cognitive Services. I've used code components that I built using Power Platform Component Framework, and I'm also going to use the data from. I also use the data from the model-driven app that we were looking at the moment. Now, I could not use AI Builder because those models are accessible via Power Platform apps, but not via code. I have not figured out how to do that, even if it is possible, right? So hence Azure AI felt like the best bet for me. But I have to apologize that I can't do a live demo of this due to the complexity of having to run a screen reader live and to avoid the sort of jarring experience of listening to the reader narrate every single element on the page. So what I've decided is I have decided to pre-record the demo, edit it slightly to allow for you all to watch it as it does its magic, right? So I'm going to play the video now.
General, a close-up of a hand holding a stack of paper money.
Before I continue, I just want to know if you are able to hear what it's saying.
We can hear it. I think there's a slight echo, but it's fine.
Right. Okay. So let me continue that with that. So you can see that the screen reader is able to narrate about the photo on the screen. Now, as I change the image, the code component is connecting to Azure AI in the background and producing a description of that image, right?
General, Virat Kohli holding a trophy.
So when it is then attaching it to the page, which the screen reader is able to pick up. So this is one more image for it to describe.
General, a living room with a TV and couches.
Fantastic, right? So it has actually been able to identify a celebrity within the image. You know, celebrities, you know, who in the cricketing world, you probably will know him quite a lot. He's the most flamboyant cricketer in the world, and it was able to pick that up, and it was able to attach that to the image and allow the narrator to then describe that image, right? So that brings me to the end of my presentation. I probably rushed it, but hopefully the speed was okay. I really hope I was able to convince you at least a little that AI need not be scary. You know, it need not be a struggle, especially for problems that we typically would have just brushed aside as impossible or would have relied on some non-optimal solutions to get around, right? So as a bonus, I have released the code and the app to my GitHub. Please remember that it is not meant to be production ready. It is just something for you all to dabble in and play with, right? If you want a link to that to the code, let me know after the presentation, or let Matt know. He'll know how to contact me, and I can basically send you the link again, right? So now I'll wait for any questions you may have, so we can answer them for you.
I don't have a question, Eswar, but I'm not sure if you saw all of the reactions that were coming in, but everyone is blown away by what you showed there. Especially the bits where you just there like, oh, I just create this PCF control. Just, I was bored and had nothing better to do as long as this presentation and everything. Just these fancy PCF controls, just, yeah, that's awesome, man. Does anyone have any questions? Feel free to come off mute and ask away.
I don't have any questions, but I'll also add on, Eswar, I feel like this is why you do such amazing work. You communicated it so clearly, showed it to everybody, and everyone here is just kind of blown away. I love it.
Thank you, Michelle.
Yeah, just to echo that really, because I mean, yeah, that just blew my socks off. Seeing those AI demos, that was awesome stuff. Well done.
Thank you. Thanks, Mike.
Right,
Have you
so feel free to unmute if you got. Oh, sorry, Matt.
I was going to ask, have you been able to use AI in a production environment so far, and how well have you seen it working if you have? It's one of those things that I always want to play with, but it's always one of those things that customers want, like, basic things first, like a system that works instead of AI. But I've always wanted to play around with it in production, but I'm kind of wondering if you have played around with it, what you've seen in terms of level of accuracy.
So what I believe is probably something that people use at these stages. I've what I can say is that I've heard two different types of stories, right? So one story where, this is again something that I quite like to work on, and I'm continuing to work on it. I'm doing research on it. It's called conversational AI, as in, having a conversation with an AI agent, and how accurate and how well it can do it, right? So I've heard two different things. So someone has gone off and done Power Virtual Agents for a customer, and they basically have used the Power Virtual Agents, and they see that it's never accurate. And there is a reason for that to happen, because when you do AI, when you do conversational, especially conversational AI, we need to remember that behind the scenes, if an AI engineer is working with you, they would basically be working behind the scenes to analyze the questions that are coming through, to see where it fails, and then retrain that AI, to continuously retrain and learn from it. Now, that's very important, and that's very key. The thing that we need to remember is that a model cannot be static. It is not like you build a model, you deploy it, and that's it. That's the end of it. You need to continuously retrain it. And like I said in my presentation, we are still in the narrow AI world, which means that it is way far away from AI agents being able to process and understand and think on its own. So we need to force it to learn and all that. That's one thing. On the other thing, personally, I am continually working on a conversational agent for HSO internals and for our customers, to help them with IT problems. What I have done, though, is what I hear from people is that they quite like the novelty of it. They quite like the fact that they, instead of going to look for knowledge bases and to how to reset password, you got someone basically sitting there and explaining what to do step by step, right? So for that purpose, the novelty is there, but it will easily wear off, like you probably heard from your customers. They think that AI is fancy. They think that AI is difficult to do, so they do not want to invest in it. But the novelty of it is quite attractive to people. So what I would recommend when you are hit with this problem, to ensure that where you're applying AI is not just for the novelty's sake, but for the real use cases, like what I showed you, places where conventional way of analyzing data doesn't exist, and you need something quirky like an AI to do the analysis. That would be my recommendation.
Sounds good.
The question: have you actually encountered a false positive situations with AI, and then what do you think of the actual ethicality of usage of the AI from ethical perspective, where it can be used for malicious purposes, and how do you approach that side?
Right, that's a fantastic question. I had like reams of slides explaining AI ethics, which I just checked out because it's too much for a 45-minute talk. The ethics. I have friends who do tremendous amount of research on ethics behind using AI, and one of the biggest concerns that people have with AI is how does it deal how does it deal with issues like racism? How does it deal with issues like sexism? The quick answer that I can give you is that the data that you use to train the models with you should factor in all of that in it. For example, if you're training to recognize photographs or pictures or faces, we need to make sure that the kind of training data that we use is representative of the community at large. It's very, very important that way. So from an AI ethics perspective, it is a huge topic, and it is very, very important. And myself, when I'm doing, even for my academic research and on my thesis writing, I ensure that the kind of words that I use are inclusive when I'm training, so that model can recognize those inclusive things. But I completely agree with you. It's an ethically, it is a minefield if you do not train the models properly with the right data, ensuring that the data that you use is fully representative of the community and everything. it is a minefield, and there are many cases within the world where AI has been implemented wrongly, and the results have been disastrous for the organization as well as the people who are using it.
Thank you.
One question I had, how do you find at the moment in terms of, when you're looking at AI Builder and comparing it with cognitive services, is it still the case that cognitive services wins out purely on a cost basis? Because AI Builder, although we do get some free entitlement now, it does seem to be trying to sell it at on a cost basis does seem to be quite difficult still, I find.
It is. For researching for this particular presentation, I went through a few blogs and articles that I've written, and there was one fantastic blog where it compared the cost of having AI Builder and Azure Cognitive Services, and combining that with Power Platform itself. Phenomenally different, right? So what they did was compare an AI model satisfying 100 requests, 200 requests, 200,000 requests, and 1 million requests. When doing 100 requests, the costs seem to be similar, right? But as you scale, the costs for AI Builder are prohibitive, to say the least. I mean, it's like holy sort of thing, right? So it's like £1 million a month or something like that comes through. Whereas when you're talking about Azure Cognitive Services, it still lives within the sort of acceptable levels from a month. So from a purely cost-based cost effectiveness of the solution, yeah, AI Builder is still fundamentally on the wrong side. Cognitive services, on the other hand, I have seen tiny little differences in the quality of what I get as output from cognitive services as well as AI Builder. AI Builder seems to be slightly more naive when it comes to doing some text analysis and image analysis, whereas cognitive services is way more cleaner, I would say.
That's interesting. Thank you. So yeah, does anyone else have any questions for Eswar at all?
Right, I guess that's no. Thank you very much for attending. If you want to discuss this code again, if you need any clarifications or anything like that, if you want to just discuss AI, just follow me or connect with me on LinkedIn or Twitter. I'll be happy to have a chat. Thank you very much for listening, and thanks for the patience.
No, thank you very much. I must say that the talk must win the award for me for the best talk with the most amount of PCF controls scattered throughout the whole presentation. So I was a really big fan of that. So thank you very much for sharing. So, okay, so we're going to get ready now for our next two presenters of the evening. If you want to just take maybe just a few minutes just to get refreshed, or maybe just get another drink, then by all means. But yeah, we're going to be handing over in a few minutes to Jason and Larry. So yeah, if you guys want to just get your sort of decks shared and ready to go, and then we'll give it maybe about a minute or two before we kick off.
Do you know what the problem with 45-minute presentations are, Joe?
Go on.
It is too short to finish a drink, but not long enough to like go and get another one and be ready for that one. So it's something to be said about training your cat to go get you a drink from downstairs.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I've got a cat on my lap at the moment, and she's incapable of doing anything of that sort. She just wants a cuddle.
Yeah.
You need to have smaller containers.
Smaller, drink smaller amounts. It's not economically friendly. The problem.
Just walk around with it like stuck to your veins constantly, just like a massive sort of like canister.
So I've got a Xbox mini fridge on order. So that's going in the office in the new house.
I think a mini fridge for me, that would be an excellent idea.
The other alternative is you just get a bigger drink to last the whole evening. I mean, a German Stein
Yes.
would do nicely.
Now you're talking. Michael, can you sort us out? Can you get us a few ordered and sent across?
No problem.
In Germany, there's Steins there. So. Oh.
Hello.
Hello.
Oh. So like get him
He's
involved
got
with the
your
user groups at a
smile.
young age.
He's got your smile.
She.
She, sorry. I'm dreadful. Okay, all right. There's been so many babies, I can't remember who's got boy, girl. Yeah.
It does.
But
It's like
gorgeous.
it is a baby boom for the power platformers at the moment. It really is.
It's we all ran out of Netflix around about midway through
Exactly.
2020. The people are just have a baby.
You enjoyed the chill part of Netflix rather too much. Yeah. Joe nearly lost it there.
all of my self-restraint. Oh my god.
I didn't realise I was on mute.
Yeah. That would have been funny for the recording, but never mind.
She's
Do you
adorable.
want to go back to that?
Probably best not, Joe. Probably best not.
Hello.
Yeah, she is adorable.
There you go.
Oh, she is gorgeous, Jason, and she does have your smile.
Shoot. There you go. Ah,
She doesn't want to go. She's enjoying the limelight.
I know.
Exactly.
She's just woken up basically, so she's a bit dozy.
Just like me most of the time.
Yeah, sorry, Dan. I caved after about a week. I'm ashamed to say.
I'm having trouble working in the office with that behind me. It keeps staring at me in the back.
So the thing is, I rationalised it in my own mind because I've got a Peloton now. So I thought, okay, if I do the Peloton, then it's a bit of a sort of a trade-off. As long as I do that each day, then maybe.
So did you see the rise and fall of Peloton recently?
What's that on?
So it's like there was a massive boom in Peloton sales because of the pandemic, everyone couldn't go out and exercise, everyone bought Pelotons. But then they ramped up production and ramped up staff so much that then the need died down and they're left with all these Pelotons that they can't sell and all this staff that are just there.
Is that rumored or actual? I remember reading about it, but I don't know if it was confirmed that they are actually slowing down. But yeah, they've had like a crappy 2021, I reckon. They had a great 2020.
No, the stock price has gone down. And they had what was it? 2 TV shows that showed characters dying whilst using Peloton products. So that's really going to hammer your brand one way or the other, isn't it? So yeah, it's just suckers like me who are buying them at the moment. Really.
I mean, I think the tech is great because no one does it like they do. But yeah, they've just had, I think, a string of bad luck, I reckon.
Well,
Yeah, I'm enjoying mine so far, to be fair. But yeah, let's see how long I stick to it.
Lost nearly 40 billion in market cap value in the past year.
Ouch.
So yeah.
Cool. Okay, Jason, Larry, you good to go?
Yeah, should I share my screen?
Can do. But yeah, we're pleased now to welcome and introduce, well, two of my favourite people at this anyway, Jason and Larry. So Jason is, well, amazing in terms of anything to do with dynamics and customer services like that. Larry is the infamous Badger landlord. And I think, is this the first time you're presenting, Larry, as well?
no, it's not. But I just, well, you asked me so many times, I thought I better do it.
Wore you down, yeah. So yeah, we're really pleased to introduce them now. They're going to be taking us through a power platform grand design. I'll try and pull as many Kevin McLeod expressions on the webcam as possible.
Funny you should say that, because before I actually press the play button, I mean, it's going to be hard for us to follow Eswar for sure. I mean, you guys should have swapped it the other way around, but we'll make it work. But also, I didn't expect the audience to be international, so hopefully some of you get the reference, but I'll play it anyways. enough of the audio. But yeah, thanks, Joe, and welcome to our little session about Power Platform grand designs. My name is come on, click away. Jason Almeida. I am a pre-sale solution architect at Hitachi Solutions, focusing on the Power Platform and Dynamics. But I've been doing a fair bit of delivery as well, so kind of tread both worlds. Although when I did move teams a couple of years ago, they said, "Oh yeah, it's a move," but now I end up doing both roles. So I got my feet in both camps basically. Over to you, Larry.
Yeah, and I'm Larry Mercuris. I am D365 CE, what used to be known or still is known as CE, CRM, whatever it's called nowadays. And Power Platform consultant at HSO. And happily enough, I'm actually quite glad to be working with Eswar and then see his greatness close up. So I do all sorts of things when I do them with regards to D365 and then Power Platform, and that's where effectively the idea came, kind of sprung up of for this presentation, that Power Platform is a platform, and it's got to be designed in some shape or form, but it's got quite a few things that may be related to different things, to something different, and that something different is the physical world of buildings. So we will try to bring this kind of comparison levels between the Power Platform or even the digital world in general, and try and compare it to the building trade, shall we say. The fancy one, but because it's a grand design, not anything, but is on the other side, it's a building trade. So we'll talk about that.
Yeah, and for Michael and Michelle, I suppose basically Grand Designs is a TV show that's really popular. It's been going, I don't know what, 8-10 seasons now, and it's about like these crazy, insane like house designs that have been come up and how they go about building it. And you know, that is really what a part of this session is about you know, bringing that physical representation to, you know, a very digital space we work in. Sometimes because you don't see it, you kind of lose a bit of the focus. And you know, we all love a good analogy, and sometimes it helps customers understand things as well. Funny enough, whenever I've done like proof of concept demos, I always use that image right there, because you know, we say that this is the concept, you know, and we want to take this from this concept, this cardboard cutout, even though we built it, into reality. And you know, customers sometimes get that sense, you know, using a simple image like this. And yeah, you know, building architecture, you know, you can see how we draw parallels to the Power Platform. And Larry and myself basically went down this little rabbit hole to figure out where else can we draw these comparisons, what other considerations can you have, and that's really how we shape this. And you know, the second point is it's about giving everyone a little different perspective, and hopefully this perspective will tease out some of those interesting nuggets that we've uncovered. And then finally, you know, we're hoping this will let you see the wider context when you're on your project or implementation that you're doing, because I know I've faced it as well sometimes when you're in the midst of a project and you're doing your delivery work, you might get caught up on the little details, and while those little details are important, you might sometimes, you know, lose focus on the wider goal, or sometimes focus on the wrong detail, or maybe even go down the wrong path. And you know, all of those, you know, sometimes taking that step back will help you with this as well. And we've seen Microsoft, you know, push out initiatives in that front as well. And yeah, also, I don't know if you've seen on Netflix, there's this new show that does like the VR version, where you basically go through your room in virtual reality, as opposed to it's like the next grand designs type thing. You can tell that's what we watch in our spare time almost. But anyways, we'll move on to the next topic. Over to you, Larry, to compare apples and oranges.
So yes, apples and oranges. Just to paint you a bit of a picture on what exactly we're comparing here. and then what sort of parallels we're drawing. So take the digital world of a digital home, of a family, of organization, of an enterprise company, and you will have very specific elements that are core requirements of it. You start the specific, and those are effectively the parallels to the buildings in different sizes, but the core components are quite similar. So you've got the doors, which are effectively your entrance, your login, your authentication into the building or into the digital kind of tenant, if you like. Then you've got the same sort of thing for the doors and windows to make sure that they are secure. That's your security considerations. You've got your mailbox, your letterbox in the door to consider. One of the weaker points in this, from the security point of view, from physical and the digital world, both ways. So you need to consider all of those sort of things, and then you can draw quite a few different parallels in terms of management of the actual either the tenant system as such, regarding how it is being looked after. So when you take the digital world, you will have your network layout, and your traffic routing and so on and so on. Whereas in the building, you do have your electricity and plumbing installation that goes across the building and ties into one system, and it has to be consistent in that respect. Now the question there would be probably, do you have an actual dedicated plant room where all your systems go into? That would equate to having an actual specialized IT team who manages your traffic, so to say. And then taking it a bit further on, we've got quite a few specific components that most of the buildings cannot do without. When you take, of course, depending on the building, but you will have something like a kitchen and a bathroom. If it is a building that someone can live in, it will have a bedroom. Then you would have additional things. So yeah, those sort of things that we are comparing is those standard elements that you would have in a system, and those standard elements in the buildings. Right. So shall we actually start talking about the buildings themselves?
Yeah, sure. So we'll start off with, the first thing that you need to consider is getting the architecture right. And, that is fundamental to any house build or house build activity that you do, and any Power Platform solution you build as well. I mean, it's always easy to, say, let's get building and we'll get started and figure it out. I mean, with Power Platform, it's easier to correct those mistakes, not so much with the building once you set it in stone, literally. But once your solution is in play, sometimes you can't undo those mistakes. And I've worked with customers where things have been designed just off kilter, and now they have to live with it. So much so that I've had to tell them, right, guys, you're going to have to go back to the drawing board and start again because it is just that bad. And they never want to hear that. So getting that design and architecture right is really, really important. And we've kind of split out design and architecture, and we'll cover a little bit more on the design side on the next slide. But essentially, this is a balance that you need to maintain, and this is not an exhaustive list. When a customer comes to you with a problem, the first thing is you want to understand what they need, what they want, what they think, oh, it's nice to have. And then you ultimately want to try and solve those issues, and those things they don't correlate with each other in a way, almost, not always at least. You want to consider cost, you need to consider how they're going to deal with the change and what you're going to suggest, as well as what you're going to suggest. Well, how disruptive is that change as well? And I'll give you a couple of examples, bring us back to the grand design concept. So when we were looking to move, we're like, yeah, we're gonna look for a house, and my wife and I, we set out and we made a list of things we want, and we said, you know what, if we move out of the country, we'll get all of what we want, and we'll get it at a cheap price as well. But then thinking about it, the reality is all of our friends, everything is based in London. He figured, you know what, that change is just going to be too big for us at this point in time. We're not ready for that kind of thing, and you really want to consider that would be a next step for us. So that change was what drove us to some of our decision. Also, trying to move that far away, I think it would just be disruptive to the way we live as well. So another reason why we decided against it. But lo and behold, we did find a place, but it needs a bit of work. It's a doer-upper, and the first thing we did was we called in a couple of architects and said, right, we need more room. Got a dog and a little one, and we need more space in the house. And the guy came around, he had a walk, and essentially, when he looked around, he said that, yeah, I understand that you want and you need more space, but in reality, your problems could be solved by just doing a bit of redesign work on the inside. And that's where he said, oh, if you move your stairs, that's going to unlock a shit ton of room for you. And that made me realize as well that sometimes that what you need doesn't necessarily solve the problem, and sometimes the customer needs that input when they ask for help. And that really made me think about this analogy here. And when it came down to the extension, obviously cost was a big factor as well, because I'm thinking we do it all in one go, take a big bang approach. Again, in the Power Platform world, that might, you do want to do it in an agile way, and if you've got your automated deployment, then it should effectively give you quick time to value, as well as at a reduced cost, not so much in the building context. So my analogy kind of broke down a little bit there, but what do you think, Larry?
Well, I am somewhat in a similar sort of situation with regards to the actual living space, and need some more. Therefore, I probably would need to go and hire a specialist architect to consider the options, to find out, to kind of align the needs and the capabilities, possibilities, and also consider whether it's worthwhile. The dream for me personally is to actually dream my own, to build a brand new house by my own requirements, where I can make quite a few specific structural decisions, and make it work for me. The reality really is that it's not always an option. So quite often we are stuck with a building that was built 50 years ago. And similar with the digital environments of organizations, they may have implemented their first kind of email service 30 years ago, and then they kind of just added on to it and progressed from there. The question is whether it's worthwhile actually rebuilding something or fixing the existing things. But any of those sort of changes are quite significant, and and have got a very strong impact, taken to the point of disruption, because this changes to an existing system, to an existing building, that are quite significant. They will create a lot of disruption. So even the renovation, the extension side of things, as Jason was talking about, it's all about that you won't have peace and quiet whilst the work is going on. But at the same time, it will still take my own time, because I will be overlooking what's going on, whether I like it, like what's going on or not. And in the project delivery side of things, of a solution, the disruption time would be the disruption for the subject matter experts, to make sure that that the actual solution is the one that is being there. However, when talking about the architecture elements, the key part of it is the governance, making sure that the correct governance is implemented, making sure that you've got the right electricity installation and enough water supply to run the building. So that governance is one of the key parts in consideration to the future side, to the future extensions, expansions, and changes. So once those elements are in place, then we can start thinking and building the actual items that are inside. And in here, going to the next of our kind of visuals, we've got an image which has got many elements inside of a building. Yet again, as I was saying, it does have, the insides will have very specific, the inside of the building will have very specific items. It is a bit like in the digital space, you will have your email service, you will have your messaging service, you will have your maybe CRM system or whatever that would be, but some sort of a data structures and so on. The question, I suppose, is about more about the wants rather than the needs, because you can have your kitchen, bathroom, and bedroom as your requirements, as your basic requirements, but then you think, oh, maybe I actually need additional dining room or maybe a gym. So question is, where does it fit in? Do you actually need that? Can you afford that? And then even if you get it kitted out, will you be using it? That's another side. And on that front, question also then becomes, where do you start? Where do you start when you start kitting it out? Do you start with the wall sockets, or do you start with the color of your walls? Looking it nice, and then you consider where to put the wall sockets, because quite specifically the lazy boy example in your living room, if there aren't sockets in the floor, you won't be able to put that very nicely in the middle of the room to connect it to the floor. You will have to keep it somewhere close to the wall to be able to plug it in. So those sort of considerations. And I believe you've got a few views, Jason, as well.
Oh yeah. I mean, touching upon the purpose and layout of rooms, in my head, that analogy ties to your data model to some extent. You want your room to have a purpose, just like you want your data or your table to have a purpose. You can have that open plan living where everything's in one place, but eventually that does spell trouble. So you might have a preference to it, but having a defined purpose is usually quite important. Also having how all of these connect to each other as well. The relationship between your tables as well is something that is really important to consider. Now, there is a slight asterisk to this as well in relation to the user experience. But just finish off the relationship piece is when it comes to how you can report on or flow between your tables as well on your user interface. Those relationships are going to be key to getting those right. And we've been in houses where it's got an off-kilter room layout, and that just doesn't work for anyone, and you end up having a room that you don't actually use. Now, the user experience piece, before I address the relationship piece, I just want to talk about this thing really, because for me this becomes quite important when we're past the architecture phase into sort of the build phase of the project, and you really want to understand what the customer is going through, and having empathy here is really, really important, because understanding what they feel when they do it, how they go about doing this, and looking at it really from their perspective makes a really big difference to you designing a solution that works for them. What was I going to say? Someone gave me a good example around that once, and now I've somehow managed to forget that one, but we'll shelve that for now. But yeah, essentially, thinking about being in their shoes will help you ultimately design the right solution. And this is really coming from the user experience perspective. Now, I talked about relationships. Sometimes you might be at odds where you design a data model that is, from a model perspective, is sound, but from a user experience perspective is rubbish. And this is where you've got to consider to bridge that gap, be it through automation in the background, to make sure that from a user experience perspective, it works as they would flow through flow through the app or the solution they're using, but in the background you may have to do some work to automate certain elements so that it is a frictionless experience for them. And ultimately that translates into better usage of that solution. And when it comes to automation, I'm sure we've come on. It's working. There you go. We've all thought about those scenarios around automation. We think, this would be a great thing to automate, and we're gonna put this in, and then before you realize it, and I mean, yes, this is a code related example, but I thought it was a very fitting image where you end up spending more time managing that piece of automation. And that automation it doesn't necessarily have to be code. It could be a flow, and that flow just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and that is effectively your technical debt. So and I know they say technical debt relates to code, but it doesn't necessarily relate to code. So yeah, I think that's a very important piece to consider. Larry, do you have anything to add on the automation?
Yeah. The one example I think that we were talking about prior to this presentation was the consideration of open living and closed living type of elements, where you've got open spaces and then not everybody kind of you've got your kind of flat data situation in the open space, physical open space. Or maybe it is segregated nicely and neatly in each of the room, and then make sure you got the doors right, type of situation. So that's where it goes. Now, going into the actual physical automation piece of houses, buildings, it's probably less of a closer comparison approach in that respect. However, question is, how many of you have got some sort of smart devices in the house? And I bet a fair few of you. I can see hands going up. I do as well. And that is your automation. And we just got more and more of that coming into our homes. But at the same time, it's all about the scale. So, for example, if you have got to fill in a form once a week, you may consider leaving that as a filling form once a week. Whereas if you do that, if 10 people do that 10 times each day, then it's definitely a case for an automation. So similar sort of way, whether you have to get up and click a switch, light switch to turn the light on, or would it be some sort of automated process? It's just one of the examples. It's probably a bad one, but hey. Now, from, I suppose, the actual digital comparison is that to this 80-20 rule to automate 80% of the use cases in the actual physical world. Sometimes it's applicable, sometimes it's not so much, which actually does bring to that scale element of us. And then the scale is effectively, it could be just a personal application, personal productivity application, and implementation as such. And then it could be an apartment, a flat in an apartment, where you would have something like your managed services situation. It could also be an individual house where as well as the house, you may have to look after the garden in front, the driveway, and then the garden in the back. Maybe you even have a shed, and then it goes into the actual company buildings. And we found that it actually does work with these comparisons across the board of the buildings, even to the point of actual delivery of it. Now, the key differences in here are that you would use different tools for your implementations, for your buildings. If you are building an extension to a house, or to any sort of building, you would consider that it has to integrate with all the existing systems, with all the plumbing and electricity, and you will want to make sure that the windows and doors are shutting and locking, to make sure that it does work in that respect. But the principle is effectively exactly the same across the board. So going across the same, it actually takes us to what sort of roles.
Yeah, just on the scale piece, I think it is an important factor, because depending on the next slide as well, that will sort of impact your decision making and how you might do some things as well, because the things you might do for a very small piece of work or a tiny app or a tiny piece of automation would be different to something you'd apply to, a scenario where you have an organization-wide Power Platform adoption with multiple environments, multiple workloads. You take a very different governance approach to it as well. So you do have to consider that when you're designing and implementing your solutions as well. Sorry, Larry. Back over to you for your roles.
Well, there's no need to be sorry. That's a very good point. Which takes us to the roles that are getting involved when implementing something. Now, we've got our architect situation, when we actually architect the core elements of the building, the load-bearing wall, so to say, and then we've got a project manager quite often, and then the builders and developers, and oddly enough, I have mentioned that to a couple of people, and people did not like it much. But the reality is that the consultants, the developers that we are within the Power Platform or D365 space, we are the builders of the Power Platform. So builders actually do the actual work. They build the building, they put it together, they make it work.
Hey, it's also being a builder.
Well, here we go. But the key part, it's that depending on the size of implementation, the roles can vary. As we all know, in the digital world, it could be that one person does a little tiny piece of application and it just does the job. So one builder comes in, we discuss the needs, and they do whatever is required to actually do the changes or updates or refurbishments. In some other situations, when you actually do need to repurpose the space there, or build a brand new massive building, then you will be hiring an architect to actually do to make sure that everything is correct. And depending on how many people will be involved in doing the work, you may need or may not a project manager to do the work. But when it gets to the higher scale, there's always a client in one of those situations, and it's always important, as Jason was saying earlier, is the communication and the empathy of the situation, to understand that what actually is required, what the actual issue is trying to be solved with whatever is being implemented. So yet again, we may be building some sort of room, and then the windows are at a height of I don't know, 2 meters, which is not really a nice situation. But if you have good communications with your builder, they will put it right. They will put in the correct space. And by saying 2 meters, I mean it's very, very high up.
I mean, one thing that we haven't illustrated on here, and I mentioned earlier, is we're seeing projects now include things like a UX designer as well, especially in the Canvas world. I mean, let's not forget to give the model world some love as well, just as I saw in the chat earlier. I mean, that still has an experience that you can make sure works well, and there are still ways and means of, very simple ways to make the experience of someone using a model app, whether it's on on a desktop or a mobile, a cleaner experience. I mean, my pet peeve on this is the standard 3-column view, and when you give that to someone to use it on a mobile, that experience just falls apart. And I always like to go, sort of, I think it's like 30-30-70, because then when you do it on a mobile, it actually aligns up really well, and they see the information in the right order as well. It's such a small thing, but for the end users who are using it, they don't have to basically scroll all the way down to find the information they're looking for.
But Microsoft are making it easier now. Your business process flow experience is going to be better. You will have different colors.
I saw that on the release notes. I was like, surely that can't be on the release notes, but yes, it is. Yeah, this is a good
user experience. Yes, which yet again is that you will have an actual kind of room designer to identify, to give you ideas of what it may look like. Yet what the design and experience. The design and experience are different things. You may have a beautiful design that is not comfortable whatsoever to use, and not being used well or liked much. Exactly the same thing with applications. You may have applications that are not liked, therefore not used well, and which renders it effectively useless.
Wow, very harsh words there, but yeah, just to wrap this up, what we've just to summarize the sort of grand design element of it, as you have with a house build or a home improvement project, you always need to factor in all of those various architectural considerations and constraints that will normally decide what you can and can't do. Me personally, I always think designing with empathy is really key. So much so that when I'm on a project, I always do want to understand what the end users are going through, and then try and get that fed up the chain to the product owner to make sure they're factoring those in. Because if the end users aren't using the solution, everything up the chain sort of falls apart as well. And like we said, the scale will have an impact on some of the decisions as well as the roles you have. And you might be a single person on a project doing all of these roles at the same time, in which case you're going to take all of these into consideration when you're working on the project. And there are a few questions as well that you need to keep in mind, Larry.
Well, we do want to leave you with a few questions, and the question is, what exactly you should be considering, what is your problem that you're trying to solve, and what is the importance of those elements within the problem that do need to be solved. Like in the building, is where you start. What's your priority on which room do you fit out first? And the important element here is actually finding and using the right tools. So you can, if you're building a little shed, you may be okay with a spade and a shovel, building the foundation for it. When you're building a big, massive building, you probably will want to hire a digger, and similar sort of consideration might be that I want a state-of-the-art kitchen, and yet I'm going to be doing just bread and beans on toast all the time. So yet again, the usability, and the cost accordingly would be considered. Going further on is the user experience. So user experience of the application, of the solution, whatever that would be, and user experience being within the building, even to the point of if you are in some sort of an office, is that office comfortable for you to be in? And also I already touched on that, making sure that you can afford to live in it, because as applications and the buildings, they are solutions, and the buildings, they may be quite similar in terms of the cost. So you may have a massive massive application that costs you quite a lot to run and upkeep, and you don't get much use of it.
No licensing questions, please.
No licensing questions. And the same way, you may be in the house that cost you a fortune to get going, to be in a reasonable shape, and what does it cost you to run it? So here we are. We probably will want to leave you with a question. What's your next grand design?
Yeah, and thanks, guys. There's a very different take to follow on from Eswar, but hopefully, you've taken some interesting nuggets from the various perspectives we've brought along today. And yeah, maybe you can use this analogy on your customers, and maybe it'll be easier for them to understand. So yeah, there you go. Thanks a lot for listening.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So just looking over the chat, I think we do have one question from Eswar actually a little bit earlier on. So Eswar asks, how do we help customers understand that breaking and rebuilding it every few days is not good? How do we plan for that kind of disruption and change?
Oh, what was the? I kind of lost connectivity, so I didn't actually hear what your question was.
So the question was, how do we help customers understand that breaking down the house and rebuilding it every few days is not a good idea? How do we plan for that kind of disruption and change?
So are they asking you to break down the house and rebuild it?
Well, the customers, so they may not be asking it, but yeah.
I think quite often is that comparison of the power socket location. So they one day they say they want a power socket on one wall, and then the other day they want it on a different wall, and they think that there's no, you only have to put the socket on the wall, but what about putting all the wires in? And that's effectively breaking down the wall situation. And in that respect, I think bringing the analogy to say that you've got a room, and now what you want to do, you want to break down the wall and rebuild it in a different place type of situation. And giving that analogy, I reckon, would give quite a few people a better understanding on how much work is involved in doing a change on the system.
Yeah, I think it's definitely something we've faced, well, at least me personally have faced before. And there are a couple of things I tend to do is, obviously, depending on how often this occurs, I think the first, if there are, depending on the scale of change as well, I think it's worth calling it out. If you realize you've gone down the wrong path, then it might be that the design to start with needs revamping. But it is quite frequent that customers might make smaller changes while you're in the middle of delivery, and this is where the guidance for options comes into play. So presenting some of those options and being open with the customer is really helpful, because if you present those options, sometimes they might pick one that works for them. The second point is if they are changing their mind, then it could be a challenge around getting the right business process analysis that needs to happen before you guys are picking this up. So again, if this is something that you see frequently, or maybe when you're faced with process related questions, if they are seem a bit sort of lost for words, then they might have to go away and understand how they want their business to work and how it does work and how they might want it to work in the future as well, and come back to you with a more unified vision. There's always the option to say, what, we can have it your way and do it this way, but be open about the fact that this will have downstream impacts, and if they're making the decision, then they are comfortable with the decision they're making. I normally caution against, if I think they're not ready, I'll just say, guys, maybe it's not the right time for you to do this. Maybe you want to take it away. Yes, it might result in us not doing the project or not doing that piece, but they'll probably thank you later for giving them the hard news. So yeah, hopefully those pointers help.
The pointers as they are, as a few of us in here as consultants, we probably understand those. I think the key part here is for the customer to actually take it understanding, and that was one of my ideas, is to actually have those kind of comparison elements, to say that what you're asking me to do here is to change the wallpaper. Okay, that's fine. If you want me to remove the wall, then we got to talk at a different level. So finding those parallels in terms of how big the job is, to identify and give people the idea of that size is the key part, and probably the idea of the whole of presentation, if anything.
So would you say then maybe the temptation is, far too often sort of just go, yes, customer, oh yes, we'll do that for you, absolutely, that's absolutely fine, but then not actually explaining, okay, we're going to have to spend probably the whole weekend redoing this for you, and effectively we're just trying to please the customer more than actually just having an honest conversation with them.
And I think that applies to, yes, to the making changes, and yes, to delivering the original request as well. I don't know how many of you guys on the call do it, but I think it was on my last project I got known as the why guy. Because yeah, because they're like, yeah, we want the system to do this. I'm like, why? And I think the term is, they say, ask the why 5 times, and then eventually you get to the right answer, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, and that normally, again, is another way of trying to bear down into the actual detail and the motivation behind some of the requirements they have.
First comment is, I want it the same but different. Yeah, well, what's different? Yeah, tell me what the difference is. That's great. But yeah, if anyone else has got any more questions, then yeah, feel free to unmute, or yeah, just fire away. I guess while we're waiting, one question I had, I was just curious in terms of, where do you see, elements like, the Centre of Excellence kit, how important are they when it comes to a grand design, would you say?
Well, as I kind of mentioned that as a governance piece, and then the likes of the Centre of Excellence, quite often you do put the Centre of Excellence, and you do need the Centre of Excellence when there's more than one person working on the system. So I probably, in terms of comparison, I would see that going into some sort of a plant room of the building, where items are regulated, automated, monitored, and set up correctly. But when one person is within the building, or one shall we say household is in the building, you may be able, and you will be able, to monitor quite a lot of things manually, which is not a problem. As soon as it goes into a wider area of things, it's that's when it goes into needing that monitoring and governance piece. So the importance of those implementations, it's about thinking where things go, and how do you actually consider them being arranged and put together.
Joe, was your question around the analogy, or the when is it appropriate, out of curiosity?
I guess probably more the latter. Is it, do we need to be thinking about it literally from day one, or is it something, are these tools that maybe we can introduce later on, once you've actually just got over the initial hurdle?
I think it depends on the organization's size and scale, and where they see the Power Platform going. I know all of us on the call know where it can go, and we can quite easily talk 9 ways to Sunday about, you can move every workflow off the Power Platform, blah 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 blah. But if they are not ready for it, then it is sometimes doing a little bit too much too soon. Like on a really small customer who just has a handful of apps, sometimes they might see it as unless they feel free to go at it themselves, they might see it as an overhead for themselves. But then if we know, like for example, a banking financial institution is who comes to us and says, oh, we've been dabbling on the Power Platform, I'd be like, right, you guys need to get started on the COE first, get that set up and running, and then you can think about everything else. And I'm going to break, apologies, Larry, I'm going to break the analogy here, because the concept I've used here is that, you know, they've got cars driving around everywhere with various solutions, but no roads and no signage anywhere. And the COE it gives them that. And, you know, once they have that in place, then they've got the rules of how people should work and, you know, how things should be deployed. You can have cameras to keep an eye on things, so on and so forth. So I do think it is relevant to the size of the organization, but also where they see themselves going. If an organization sees this as the way forward, then you know, make a start with it, because it's relatively easy. Well, Microsoft made it really easy to deploy now, yeah, I think.
I think in terms of appropriate, it's always a decision. It's not about needing or wanting, and is decision of consideration. Well, how is it required? And as Jason said, whether it is an overhead to something that they manage. But I think I've got an example to bring it back to the building situation. So you've got a building, and if you've got the plant room that everything is wired up already, where you can monitor the heating and the lighting in every single floor of the building, where you've got 15 floors, shall we say, then you can just let people into any of the floors, and they can run and you monitor what's going on with the heating and lighting, shall we say. But if you haven't got that sort of system in place to start with, then you have to consider where to get all the wiring in to make sure that I can manage all of these things. Have I connected this and this and this light together already or not, type of situation. So that's the analogy on that from my perspective. The earlier it is considered, if it is required, the better it will be. But then there's yet again, you probably wouldn't have a full-on plant room if you've got 5 people in the house.
Interesting stuff. Okay, does anyone else have a question at all? Feel free to unmute or pop it into the chat.
Yeah, definitely. Dan's cars analogy is great.
Yeah, I love that. Bumper cars to scale electrics. Yeah, love it.
Yeah. I think definitely the winner there. But everybody loves a good analogy, so.
Yeah. Cool. Okay then. Well, if we haven't got any questions then, so yeah, all this would say is to thank you very much for Jason and Larry for that really interesting talk. Some food for thought there, and definitely some interesting ideas that we can, you know, take into our daily work with the platform. So thank you very much for sharing, and thank you for coming along today. It's been really great.
Thank you for having us.
No problem.
Yeah.
Okay, good
It's
stuff.
excellent, really great. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. I should share the link to the thing.
The feedback form.
The feedback form.
Yes.
Quickly.
So before we wrap,
email
so a
back.
couple of housekeeping things before we wrap up. Matt's going to be putting a feedback form in the chat. If you can, please do give us your feedback. It's really important that we can, you know, obviously improve things in future. You know, things maybe if you want to see more particular type of content, if you think the format needs changing, various different things like that, please do let us know so we can obviously action that. We've got some potentially some exciting news about the committee itself for Manchester. We're going to be expanding the membership of that, and hopefully for 2022 focusing on doing more events, which would be really good. So make sure that you are registered to the community.dynamics user group to keep abreast of our all of our latest events, and hopefully, fingers crossed, we might end up being in person again in the very near future. Who knows? Omicron permitting, of course. But until then, all I need to say is thank you very much for attending tonight. Hope you found it useful, and we hope to see you again next time.
I messed up with the link. I forgot to change it from anyone inside my organisation to anyone, but fixed it now. New link.
Thanks, everyone. Really great content. Good to see you all.
Thanks, Dan. Cheers.
Yeah.